This is how you replace a SureStop brake pad. So the first thing you want to do is unhook the rear V-brake like this. Once that brake is open, we're going to take an Allen wrench and take the SureStop brake pad out of the brake arm. Now you take your SureStop pad that you just took off your bike. If you have a noodle, you're going to want to take this noodle off. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. But if you do have one, pull the cable through and save this noodle, and you'll want to use it on your replacement part. Now unhook the front brake because we're going to pull this cable all the way out. If there's a cable crimp on the end, you can just pull that off with your hand and make sure this cable is ready to pull out by taking off the noodle and everything else that's on it. And next we want to take the SureStop pad and cable and just pull it all the way out of the housing. Now I'm going to take this SureStop replacement part and I'm going to run the cable back through the noodle that I just took off the old part. So put the cable through the noodle like that. Make sure this little protector piece doesn't slide out as the noodle passes through. And once the noodle is coming through, or the cable is coming through the noodle, just pull it all the way through until it matches up with the SureStop replacement part. Now we're going to take our SureStop replacement part and we're going to undo the nut and keep 2 of these washers here, take the rest of them off so that just the concave and convex washer are on there, just like that. And we're going to put this back into the brake arm. And as the washers go back on, we're going to do a convex washer first, faced in that direction. Then the big concave washer, faced in that direction. And then the small washer, if you have one, on the end. And then we're going to put the nut back on. Now we're going to take our Allen key and making sure that this pad is aligned parallel to the rim and high enough on the rim so that the pad itself, the pad surface, is in the middle of the rim surface. So once it's aligned, we want to tighten that down. So now we're going to take the end of the cable and the end of the housing and push the cable right back through the housing. Until the housing meets up with the end of the noodle. Then we want to make sure that everything is seated properly. So the noodle is in the back and the housing and noodle line up and fit together properly. Hook up the front brake noodle by simply pushing the cable back through the noodle, connecting the noodle to the housing, and then we want to put the noodle back in the cage. Now we locate the little brake boot that came off the cable initially. We're going to put the cable back through that brake boot and whoop, right back to this noodle, which we want to be in the cage of the front brake. Now we're going to thread the end of the cable through the other side of the front brake. And we want to set our brakes up to where there's about 1 millimeter of space between each pad and the rim. And once we have that, tighten down this front anchor bolt. Make sure that's plenty tight. And now we can check our brake distance. And as long as you've got just enough room to let out that front brake noodle on the front brake, That's about all the space you want. If you have more slack than that, you can get it a little bit tighter, but you want just enough so that that noodle comes just out of that cage. And then put your brake boot back. Then finally, we want to cut the cable and put a cable crimp, which looks like this, on the end of the cable, and use a pair of pliers or a tool like this to just smash that crimp onto the end, and that protects the end of the cable. And finally, we're going to connect the rear brake back together.